What's up? Welcome to Meta Monday videos with Wes. This is the Bloodrush Fellows Meta Monday video where we'll take a look at the current state of the meta. Particularly right now, we're going to take a look at the meta breakdown, some Living Legends stuff, and also a Post-Enigma, Post-Zen world. So let's jump right into it. Aurora is still the best deck. Not too much to say there. Zen and Enigma leaving doesn't hurt or really help her. The one consideration here would be that there are maybe some control decks that are more easily able to target Aurora and not have to worry about Enigma. Enigma is leaving in the first week, almost guaranteed. So with that being said, most of the context of this video will be looking at a post-week 1, post-Enigma, post-Zen world. But yeah, she's still a very good deck. If you have all the cards already, I do think she's a very reasonable pick for the first week. Florian is a deck we have seen an uptick of recently, especially starting with, I believe it was Minneapolis, or maybe even the RTN season. We've seen an uptick in Florians. We saw a pretty spicy list from Shoma on stream, playing against Pudding, I believe, running the sort of chance stacking build of using reduced to rune chance, using incantations and stuff like that to just make better use of his hero ability in the end game. I think he was also running stuff like Thistlebloom Life. So some pretty interesting stuff there. I would be curious to know what his reasoning was for bringing it and like what sort of decks it targets over the vanilla version. Either way, I think both versions of the deck are fairly well positioned in the meta, especially with Enigma leaving. Next we have new. Personally, if I'm bringing an Assassin, I'm bringing Slippy, which we'll talk about here in a second. However, she is still very good and potentially gets some sideboard spaces back with Enigma leaving. Zen was also kind of a weird matchup for her. I think it was definitely new favored, but Zen had some pretty good game into it. As a Zen player, I was often not really scared of it. It was definitely like a grindier matchup, but not really one I was worried about. So I don't think she's sad. In fact, she's arguably happy to see both of those decks go. So if anything, she got better. She got some more sideboard slots. However, we'll talk about Slippy now. Same thing for him. He's not really sad to see either Zen or Enigma go. And if anything, he got several sideboard slots back. I know in particular they were running Codex of Bloodrot, and I want to say, what was the other card? Oh, Picked Pieces. Picked Pieces and Codex of Bloodrot, and maybe even Backstab in some cases. Backstab might stick around, but like Picked Pieces and Codex of Bloodrot will probably exit the list. As if I understand correctly, they were mostly Enigma tech. We did get to see Pablo Pintor lose to one on stream, just to show you like a decent showcase of how good the deck is. They frequently will go down low in life and then just grab momentum by the balls and just hold it until the end of the game. So definitely a very strong assassin right now. If I'm bringing an assassin, personally, I am bringing Slippy. Vincent, very good, very well positioned. Enigma leaving, you are happy about. Zen leaving, you are happy about. Both of those decks were 50-50 or worse. Zen, I think, was maybe like a 35-40% win rate for you. Enigma was probably slightly better, but still not great. So with Vincent leaving, I think, or sorry, with Enigma and Zen leaving, I think Vincent only gets better. So the question would be, how are you into these other decks that are up in the top? And I think the answer is you are pretty reasonable into them. So definitely a deck I would keep an eye on if you want to pick a deck to dedicate some time to. Vincent followed by Prism, I think are both very good decks to dedicate time to and are very well positioned in the meta right now. Syndra, I'm not even going to really talk about this. I think if you brought this to the Pro Tour, you were making a mistake, to be honest with you. I am maybe not as good as some of these pro players, so maybe I'm missing something, but I just do not see the reason to bring her. Zen leaving is good for her. Same with Fi. Like Zen leaving is good for both of them, and Ira, simply because he was generally favored into the Ninja Mirror due to the presence of cards like Wax On and the ability to create Zen state from your chess piece, and Traverse just being an insanely powerful card. But yeah, I probably wouldn't bring it. It wouldn't be the worst pick ever, but I think there's better options for sure. So Fang, we saw an interesting Decimator Axe build. I'm curious if that was more for the surprise factor than anything else, or what in general it would be like the reasoning to bring Decimator. Because Fang, like I said, if you get online early enough with high enough health, you are just the best hero, or at least you have the best hero power in the game. So curious to see where that deck continues to go. I would still consider it like rogue tier for now, but definitely you need to be ready to play against it. Blocking early against him is good, simply to keep him off of fealty, because as long as he's offline, he is maybe even the worst hero in the game. So going from the best hero to the worst hero is quite a big jump, but yeah, there's that variance and that kind of reliance on your opponent to have maybe not knowledge in the matchup to do well. So I think it's a very reasonable deck, but not something I would bring. Azalea has a lot of defense reaction hate available to her in both Dreadbore and Release the Tension, so I think she's pretty good. Dominates is really good when all of these decks are running like cards that they want to block with, and like mid-range decks, control decks trying to target Aurora. Azalea could maybe prey on that, so I think that would be an interesting choice or an interesting pick for the ProQuest season. And she's definitely not going anywhere, so even for Nats could be a very reasonable option, especially ahead with looking ahead towards High Seas coming out later this year. It might be a good idea to go ahead and get some Ranger reps if you have not played Ranger yet. Prism, fantastic deck. In my opinion, the second best deck in the game right now. We've seen a massive uptick in it. We saw 3 top 8 the Pro Tour, and I assume we will just continue to see an uptick. I've already seen locals picking up cards. However, I do think it's a little bit of a bait for yourself if you are picking up Prism this close to the ProQuest season. She is not an easy deck to play. Aggro version of her is like a reasonable game plan in terms of like the skill you need to pilot. But there's a lot of like small decisions that will just lose you the game on the spot that you might not even recognize. As a 32 health hero, you're basically like Kano levels of like health, so one mistake can and will just cost you the game. So if you're thinking about swapping to it right before the ProQuest season, I would maybe keep it as your backup or just like rep it on the off time. I don't think this is one of those decks. Same with Vincent. I don't think these are one of those decks that you could like pick up very quickly. But if you're looking ahead towards Nats, or you want to pick it up at the beginning of the season and keep playing it towards the end of the season, I think it's a very reasonable choice. The more reps you get on it, the more rewarded you will be for both of those types of decks. So definitely something I would recommend. However, personally, selfishly, do not play Prism. I would like to see her stick around for a long time. Next, we have Zen. Not too much to say here. We know what's up with him by this point. He's probably going to be leaving week 1. We thought he was going to leave in the Artine season, but he stuck around for a little bit longer. So we have sort of a Briar situation here, but should be gone relatively soon, but definitely is less polarizing in terms of his matchups than Enigma is. So I don't think even if he stays around, it'll affect him at too much. Vincent might be a little bit sad, but past that, I think we're fine. That's pretty much going to do it for the meta breakdown. Not too many other interesting things to go over here. Kano still exists. Ira's still good. People are huffing Copium on Jarl and Dorinthia. Verdance actually we'll talk about, but I think definitely got a lot of stock in this meta once Enigma leaves. So we'll talk about that. So looking at the Pro Tour recap, we can see we had 2 Enigma, 3 Aurora, 3 Prism, and the Pro Tour top 8. Pretty expected. These were like some of the best decks. The only one missing from my last tier list is Zen, who didn't have the best representation. So not too shocking there. Same thing with the Calling top 8. We saw 4 Enigma, 2 Aurora, and a Slippy. I think this is, again, very reasonable. Nothing too surprising there. We'll take a very quick look at the Living Legend board. Like I said, these first 2 heroes in Enigma are almost certainly going to LL here very soon. Dash Inventor Extraordinaire, or DIE, as some people call it, is I think a reasonable pick with Enigma leaving. The Slab Dash build is pretty good, and I think maybe see some more stock and might have a chance to sort of fatigue Aurora. So I'll be curious to see if anything, people do with that. Azalea we already talked about and isn't going anywhere, so would be a very reasonable pick. And then we have a couple of heroes here that are just not even worth talking about at this point in the game. New is sort of close to LLing, 250-ish points. So I doubt it'll happen this season, but very well could happen by the end of the year. And we'd finally be free from the MST curse. However, I don't really see her LLing in the ProQuest season, so I think it would be a pretty reasonable pick. Even if she did as well or slightly better than she did last season, I think she'll be around for Nats. So new players, not too much to worry about there. However, like I said, I'd probably be looking at Slippy personally if I was playing Assassin right now. Kano's still Kano, not going anywhere. The big one that we'll talk about is Aurora, who has a very real chance of LLing this season. She got 325 recently. So if she does fairly well and is still the best deck, and there's no emergency bans, theoretically she could LL. I don't think it's super likely with Enigma leaving. I think like I said, some of these control decks will come back and keep her down a little bit. So I'm sort of expecting her to stick around till at least Nats. But it is worth noting that there is the possibility that she'll LL in like week 4 or something like that. Finally, I did want to mention one more thing. Prism is now at 500 LL points, so she's definitely climbing up there. Like I said, she's very good right now, so definitely a deck I would keep an eye on. Not in danger of leaving anytime soon, but this time next year, or maybe even by the end of the year, she could be gone, which would be sad, but worth keeping in mind if you're thinking about picking up Prism soon because of the Pro Tour results. And finally, we have the tier list I've made for the, like I said, the post-Zen, post-Enigma meta. Looking at this, they're just going to LL week 1. There's really very little doubt in my mind that these heroes will both be gone in week 1. So not too much to say there. Aurora, still the best deck. Not going to go too far into that. Prism, still pretty much the next best. Like, if you recall, my previous tier list was Aurora, then Enigma, then Zen, then Prism, and the top of B tier. So she basically just moved up, took their spot. She's still a very good deck. She has a little bit of a variance issue to some degree, but a lot of that can be countered by pilot skill. However, like I said, I must warn you, not the easiest deck to play, especially depending on the matchups. Moving on to Arachne, highly recommend playing this Assassin if you're considering playing Assassin right now. He does more of a proactive control, which I think is better than New's game plan and Mario's game plan into Aurora currently. It's probably pretty close for Mario, but I think this is Slippy has some more difficult questions that he asks or they ask turn over turn. So I would definitely be considering Slippy currently. It's also a deck that I don't think very many people are super experienced playing against quite yet. So like week 1, week 2, week 3 of the ProQuest season, I think would be a very strong pick. Next we have Florian. Talked a little bit about that on the meta breakdown. I think he's a very good spot, worth picking up, only gets better with Enigma and Zen leaving. Vincent, again, very well positioned, pretty decent matchups into most of these top heroes. A little bit difficult to pick up and pilot, but very worth the effort if you are so inclined. New, I obviously have below Arachne because I think she is just worse than Arachne, but she sure is the deck that keeps out these 2 Guardians and maybe a few other decks here and there. So, I mean, they're out of the meta for a reason. She's good for a reason. MST is just a strong set. So keep that in mind. Azalea, we already talked about this, but has good tools into defense reaction heavy decks, which a lot of these top decks like to run defense reactions. In fact, pretty much every deck right now is running at least 3 to 9, I would say, defense reactions. So worth considering. Verdance, you can combo, you can do like your sort of mid-rangey plan. I think she's only gotten better since people have been playing it and exploring it, and with Enigma leaving, again, she's only gotten better. So I moved her up to B tier here from, I believe she's in Rogue tier last time. So I think she's in a pretty good spot. And if you were ever thinking about picking her up, I think now would be a very reasonable time to go ahead and do that. Victor is, I think, the most playable Guardian right now. Is quite the jump here from C tier to B tier, in my opinion. Doesn't seem like that big of a jump, but like from I would not consider playing this deck to like I would consider playing this deck potentially. The issue is going to be like News are just really bad for you. Azalea can be pretty tough. Arachne actually is surprisingly very tough for Victor. Prism can be pretty tough for Victor. But you're good into like Aurora. You have game into like Vincent. You can fatigue them. You have game into like this ninja here, and so these ninjas down here, and probably even Dio. So I mean, worth considering. You block pretty well. You just can't really play in the reaction step. Is I think the main downside. Like at most, you're running like sinks, I would say, because it hurts your clash consistency. But at least, and maybe this is me like huffing Guardian Copium here, like Tucker. But with Enigma gone, I do think he got better, much better. In fact, you can forego some of the go again that he used to have to force simply to have a chance at beating Enigma. So I think he also got a decent number of sideboard slots back. So maybe that gives you some game into some of these other decks. I'm not really sure. I'm not really a Victor player, but I do think he got better. simply because Enigma left. Ira, again, I think is here mostly because of the speculation for Armory, the Armory deck that they announced at the Pro Tour. But like she's been in B tier for a while now, ahead of Minneapolis. I think there was a lot of eyes on her when that crazy Zephyr Needle build was going around. She hasn't really gotten worse though. She hasn't really gotten better though. She's still a pretty solid hero pick all around. She doesn't do anything the best compared to these other heroes, but like she does everything pretty well. Jarl, I still wouldn't play personally, but you have some game into Aurora. Enigma left, which was a terrible matchup for you. Zen left, which was a pretty bad matchup for you. And you have some game into some of these heroes, like Wizard's pretty bad for you, Arachne's pretty bad for you, Prism probably just loops you. But like you might be good into Vincent, you might be okay into Ira. I just personally I wouldn't play it currently. If you're playing Guardian, I would definitely recommend Victor over Jarl. These two brutes, I'm not really sure where to put right now. They're kind of in a weird spot. Nobody's really like super playing them. And with all of these defensive decks running around, I think it's a little bit dicey to be playing Levia. But I don't think they're like incorrect picks. I think I actually might even put them above Jarl, to be honest with you. I think they're pretty decent. It's just like there are decks that do better mid-range things than you. There are decks that do better aggro things than you. I just don't really see a reason to play these two decks, if that makes sense. Dio, I'm going to correct this real quick and just drop her down here. I am now convinced that people were huffing copium on this deck. I was already a little bit convinced of that, but I'm like definitely convinced of that. So don't really recommend playing her, but she's not like the worst deck ever. She's at least better than some other decks that are in here in this doo doo poopy pants tier. But like you don't block well, you're pretty prone to fatigue. If Guardian comes back, you're probably pretty sad. And like I said, with all these decks running defense reactions right now, and you don't really have many tools to deal with defense reactions, like your best thing is Hyper Scrapper, or like Overload Script or Penetration Script to try and like force through some stuff. Convection Amp, I think, is another card that you can use to try, but it's just not consistent enough, honestly. So it's like maybe not worth it. Anyway, Rogue tier, I think we have some interesting decks to keep an eye on. DIE, I talked about a little bit. Slapdash might come back, and that could be interesting. Teklo is very similar to Slapdash, so if Slapdash is good, Teklo is probably pretty good. Enigma leaving, both of these decks like. Kano is Kano. Fang, I talked about a little bit. He has the surprise factor now that everybody has seen the Decimator build, so worth keeping an eye on in your mind, I suppose, as a deck that's like potentially going to show up and potentially worth playing. Max is just here simply because I don't really know what's going to happen with the Armory deck. Most Max players I have seen or talked to are dooming on it, but who knows really what that Armory deck will do for him until it's fully explored, which I don't think it has been yet. So keep an eye out on him, but not something I would be like super worried about. Acilio, same thing as some of these other heroes where like be aware of what he is and what he's trying to do, but I wouldn't play it and I wouldn't be particularly worried about it because a lot of the stuff that hits some of these other heroes, like especially Aurora, also hits Acilio, so it's not like any particular tech you need to do, just again, be aware of the deck and what it's trying to do and all that. Rhinar, I think, is in an okay spot. If a lot of these blocky decks come back that would really like to block and try to fatigue Aurora, then I think Rhinar gains more stock. With Enigma gone, like I said, maybe it's very possible that some of them come back with like these and maybe a Decimator Dory, Decimator Fang. All these decks that really, really like to block, I think Rhinar is very good against. Intimidate is a hell of a mechanic against those decks. So something I would keep in mind, especially if you know a bunch of your locals are going to bring these fatiguey decks. Rhinar, I think, is actually a pretty solid pick for that. And you also have the chance to just like Bloodrush Fellow on turn 0 or not turn 0, on early turns of the game and just like slam damage into your opponent before they can really do anything. So definitely a deck I'd keep an eye on. Finally, we have the Doo Doo Poopy Pants tier here. I don't think really any of these heroes are worth playing. Dory, maybe for Decimator, I could see like going to Rogue tier, but I think if you see Dorinthia, you're probably not that worried, especially because you could still just bring in like some of your defense reactions and kind of hedge against Dawnblade. And even if you don't, if you're Aurora, you can still race her. So it's like, eh. Riptide is an interesting one because he might actually be, I might be a little bit too low on him, which is why he's at the top of Doodoo Poopy Pants tier. I might be a little bit too low on him because he definitely gets some more stock with Enigma being on. But there's not like a bunch of ninjas, there's not a bunch of decks he's good into right now that exist up here. Like you're good into Fang, you're good into Dory, you're good into like ninjas, but you can see they're down here, so it's like, eh. So yeah, I could see him going up, but for now I'm fairly okay with leaving him here. The rest of these decks I don't really think are worth covering. Katsu just sucks, Bravo just sucks, Kasai is just not doing good stuff right now. These two heroes are dog shit and need to get a weapon, please LSS. So yeah, that's pretty much the tier list for the day. Ahead of the Pro Tour or the ProQuest Singapore season, I would definitely recommend one of these top 3 tier decks here. I think they're all very reasonable to pick up and play, especially if you are looking forward to Nats. None of them are particularly close except for Aurora to hitting Living Legend. So definitely some interesting options here, and I'm very curious to see what the season does or how the season pans out, I should say. But anyway, that'll do it for today. Let me know in the comments what you guys think below, and let me know what you're running for ProQuest season. I myself will most likely be on either Aurora or Prism. What can I say? I'm a filthy meta chaser. But yeah, with that being said, have a great rest of the week, and I hope you enjoyed my video. Peace.